Hello students, my name is Anshu Khanna and I teach at Sri Chaitanya Vijayawada Kushala. Today we will do the topic of circular motion. This topic itself is very important. Two questions comes from this topic on an average in NEET. Moreover, the concept that we learned in circular motion are even used in the chapter of rotational. Within this heading only I will complete both horizontal circular motion as well as vertical circular motion. So let's start doing circular motion. The first thing I will like to talk here is about angular displacement. Let's say a particle goes from a point A to another point B. What path, how it goes, it doesn't matter to me. But let's say an observer is observing this motion. The observer observes that initially the particle is at A. So let's say this is the initial position vector. Finally, after making some displacement, the particle reaches B. So this is the final position of particle. The angle between this initial position and final position is called the angular displacement. But the first thing that we should understand about angular displacement is angular displacement depends upon the choice of observer. If the particle goes from A to B, the displacement is straight. No matter what is the observer, where you have chosen the origin, the displacement comes out to be same. When particle goes from A to B, the displacement is independent of the choice of observer, but angular displacement depends upon the choice of observer. Let's say rather than this person being the observer stands somewhere here. This is our observer. Now for this observer, for the same position A, initial position will be this, final position will be this, and this observer will say that angular displacement is something else. So these two angular displacement, as you can see, theta 2 appears to be more than theta 1. So the angular displacement for both the persons are not at all same. Okay. Can there be any point of observer, any position of observer for which when the person goes from A to B, the observer do not observe any angular displacement at all? Yes. If the observer is somewhere on the line joining these two positions A and B, then the initial position vector as well as the final position vector will be parallel vectors. And since they are parallel vectors, there is no angle between them. So if the observer stands here, then as seen by this observer, there will be no angular displacement. To make you understand this better, think that my eyes are fixed. I can't turn my eyes. Okay, my eyes are fixed. I can only turn my neck. So my eyes can see straight. If I observe the tip of this pen going up, I will have to turn my head up. If I observe the tip of the pen going towards you guys, I will have to turn my head towards you guys. But if I observe the tip of this pen moving away from me, straight away from me, I won't have to turn my head. So when the tip goes up, I have to make an angular displacement. When it goes towards you guys, my head have to make some angular displacement. But when it goes straight away, I don't have to make any angular displacement. So the first thing that we need to understand about angular displacement is that angular displacement depends upon the choice of observer. For same displacement from point A to point B, for three different observers, the angular displacement can be different. Next thing, angular displacement has got both magnitude as well as direction. How much magnitude? Equal to angle. Which direction? For direction, we use the right hand thumb rule. Let's say here we have got observer and the particle has got initial position here and final position here. So this is the initial position vector, this is the final position vector. Now, if this is initial position vector, this is final position vector, how do you determine what is the direction of angular displacement? Using the right hand thumb rule. Curl the fingers of right hand into the sense of rotation. So this is initial, this is final. Align the fingers of right hand in direction of initial and then curl the fingers slowly towards final. The direction in which the thumb points while doing so shows the direction of angular displacement. For example, look at this motion. If pen is hinged at this point and I turn the pen up this way. So from here initial to this final. What is the direction of angular displacement? Curl the fingers of right hand into the sense of rotation. Initial, final. Where does your thumb point while doing so? So my thumb point towards you guys and your thumb will point towards me. That's a different thing. So when we turn it, we get a direction input. To make you understand this better, I will use this notes copy. Visualize that at the center of this copy here, we have got origin. Here, we have got origin. And now visualize three axes. One x-axis, in that direction, it is positive x. One y-axis, upward, is positive y. And one z-axis with positive, with positive towards you guys. This direction is positive z. Now let us understand, if this copy turns like this, from here to here, what will you call the angular displacement? So I will curl the fingers of right hand in the sense of rotation. The copy turned this way. I will curl the fingers of right hand in the sense of rotation, and it pointed in the negative y direction. So this angular displacement is 90 degree towards negative y. If let's say copy turns this way, copy starts from here and turns this way, I will curl the fingers of right hand in the sense of rotation. It points towards me, that is negative z. So this is an angular displacement of 90 degree towards negative z. Now let's make, using this copy, an angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive x. An angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive x. What will it look like? Where is the x-axis? This is the x-axis. Positive x, there. Negative x, here. Positive x. 90 degree towards positive x. 90 degree towards positive x. So positive x has to be direction and I have to turn it by 90 degree. So positive x turning looks like what? Looks like this finger curling. Okay. So it should curl. It should turn the way my finger curled. So it will turn by 90 degree. So this angular displacement starting from here, ending here is an angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive x. Similarly, if I say visualize an angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive z. Angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive z. Where is positive z? Towards you guys. Towards you guys we have got positive z. So angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive z. So how will it turn? Positive z. If it has to turn towards positive z, it has to turn this way. So as the way my finger curled. So this represents an angular displacement of 90 degree towards positive z. Next thing, angular displacement has got both magnitude as well as direction, but still it is not a vector quantity. Despite having both magnitude as well as direction, angular displacement is not at all a vector quantity because it do not follow the law of vector addition. So next thing, angular displacement is not a vector quantity. It has got both magnitude as well as direction. You find the direction using right hand thumb rule, but it is not at all a vector quantity. However, infinitely small angular displacement is a vector quantity. However, infinitely small angular displacement is a vector quantity. So now I would like to give you guys a demonstration why angular displacement is not at all vector quantity. So what we are going to prove is that, think of two angular displacement, theta 1 and theta 2. Theta 1 90 degree towards positive x and theta 2 90 degree towards positive z. I am going to prove that theta 1 plus theta 2 is not same as theta 2 plus theta 1. So let's first see theta 1 plus theta 2. Start from here, keeping the copy straight. First do theta 1, 90 degree towards positive x. So this is positive x, 90 degree towards positive x. Okay. Then do theta 2, 90 degree towards positive z. This is positive z, 90 degree towards positive z. 90 degree towards positive z. So I started from here and I ended up being here. But rather than doing theta 1 plus theta 2, if I do theta 2 plus theta 1, theta 2 first, 90 degree towards positive z. Now do 90 degree towards positive x. 90 degree towards positive x. So this is positive x, turn it by 90 degree towards positive x. Now this time you got this broader side towards you, okay, longer side towards you. Last time you got this. So starting from same initial angle, if I first do theta 1 and then do theta 2, or if I first do theta 2 and then theta 1, I don't get the same answer. That's why theta 1 plus theta 2 is not same as theta 2 plus theta 1. That's why Angular displacement is not a vector quantity. However, infinitely small angular displacement is a vector quantity. So now let's talk about angular velocity. Angular velocity is defined as the rate of change of angular displacement with respect to time. Since we are learning the chapter of circular motion, let's focus here. Let's say a particle moves in a circle, and at some instant this particle has a speed v. In an infinitely small frame of time, the distance covered by this particle, let's say v dt, will subtend an infinitely small angle at the center, let's say d theta. If observed from center, what will be the angular velocity of this particle? The position vector of this particle with respect to center changes an angle d theta in an infinitely small frame of time dt. Now, this distance v dt can also be written as r d theta, radius times the infinitely small angle. So, this length v dt can also be written as r d theta, and you can bring this dt down. So, you get v by r equals to d theta by dt, and this brings us the famous equation omega equals to v by r. Omega equals to v by r. This is true till the time the particle moves in circle. But what if the particle do not move in circle? There are many times question asked where a particle not moving in circle and its angular velocity is asked. So how to answer such a question? Let's say there is an observer. This observer observes his friend who is at distance d, and this person moves with a velocity v at some angle theta with the line joining the two persons. Now, what will be the angular velocity of this person as seen by the observer? We can break down this velocity into two components. One, along the line joining them, this component will be v cos theta. Another, perpendicular to the line joining them, that will be v sin theta. Think over it and say, because of which velocity does the position vector of this person with respect to observer changes angle? Because of v cos theta or because of v sin theta? Your guess is right, because of v sin theta. So if somebody asks you what is the angular velocity of this person as seen by the observer, your answer will be angular velocity will be v sin theta by d. As a matter of fact, I always tell students to remember omega as v perpendicular by r. What is r? Distance between observer and the particle whose angular velocity has to be written. What is v perpendicular? V perpendicular is the component of velocity of particle relative to observer perpendicular to the line joining them. So v perpendicular is the component of velocity of the particle whose angular velocity has to be written perpendicular to the line joining the person and observer. Now, we will do two more questions to understand this better. So let's do two examples to understand angular velocity. The first example, there is a horizontal road, and on this horizontal road an ambulance moves with a constant speed v. When the ambulance is at this position as shown, the observer observes the ambulance. What is the angular velocity of the ambulance observed by this observer right now? What will be the angular velocity observed by this observer right now? So we will use here what we have learned, that omega equals to v perpendicular by r. This is observer, yes. This is the object, yes. What is the distance between them right now? Let's call it y. We can say that y cos theta equals to d. So if kids y cos theta equals to d, then you can say y equals to d by cos theta. So you know what is the value of r. R is d by cos theta. Now what we need to find is v perpendicular. What is the component of the velocity of this ambulance perpendicular to the line joining the observer and the objects whose angular velocity has to be written? If this angle is theta, this angle will be 90 minus theta. If you extend this line, this angle will also be 90 minus theta. So the component of velocity perpendicular to the line joining them will be v sin 90 minus theta, and v sin 90 minus theta is as good as v cos theta. So you can write the angular velocity to be equal to v perpendicular, v cos theta. So perpendicular to where? Perpendicular to r beta. V cos theta upon r, and the r can be written as y, and y itself is d by cos theta. So v cos theta upon d by cos theta. So that comes out to be V cos square theta upon t. Let's see one more example. This time a projectile has been projected with speed v at some angle theta with the horizontal. Your mission is to find the angular velocity of the projectile about the point of projection when it reaches the maximum height. Now let's say when it reaches the maximum height here, we all know what is the velocity of projectile. At maximum height there is only horizontal velocity, let's say v cos theta. When the particle is at maximum height, we know what is the height, and that height I am writing it as h. H is nothing but v square sine square theta by 2g. We know what is this horizontal distance. This horizontal distance will be range by 2. And we all know what is range. Range is equals to v square sine 2 theta by g. Since we know this distance r by 2, this distance h, we can find out this distance. This distance, let's say d, here we get a right angle triangle between d, h and r by 2. So we can say d equals to under root of r by 2 whole square plus h square. I am just telling you how to find out omega. So here let's say this angle is phi. Okay. If this angle is phi, this angle will also be phi. We write omega as v perpendicular by r. So first you will have to take the component of this velocity perpendicular to r. What is r? The distance between the particle and the observer, which is d. So you can write omega as v perpendicular by r, v sine phi upon r, which is d. Now it looks like a very tough thing to solve. Not at all, beta. You can write sine phi as perpendicular upon hypotenuse. Perpendicular is h, hypotenuse is d. So you get omega as v sine phi h by d, and there is already one d there, so you get d square. Now here you can substitute h as v square sine square theta by 2g and d as under root of r by 2 whole square plus h square. So next example, a particle moves in a circle of radius r with constant angular velocity omega. When I say this angular velocity omega, it is the angular velocity omega about the center. Question is, what will be the angular velocity of this particle about any point on the periphery? So if the angular velocity about center is omega, then what is the angular velocity about any point on the periphery? To answer this question, we are going to use a property that we have learned in earlier classes, maybe 9th or 10th. The property goes like this. If you have an arc on a circle and this arc subtends some angle at the center, let's say theta, then the angle subtended by same arc at any point on the periphery of circle will be equal to theta by 2, and all these angles will be equal to theta by 2. So now here question is, there is a particle moving in circle with an angular velocity omega about the center. So let's say as seen from center, the particle goes from here to here and the particle turns by some angle theta. Then as seen from any point on the periphery, let's say this, in the same time the angle turned will be theta by 2. If in the same time the particle turns by half the angle, then the angular velocity has to be half. So if the particle revolves in circle with an angular velocity omega about the center, then the angular velocity about any point of periphery, angular velocity about any point on periphery is omega by 2, half of it. Such an easy thing to remember from just one property. So now let's talk about uniform circular motion. When we say uniform circular motion, this is not at all uniform motion. It is an accelerated motion. Why? When we say velocity, it is made up of two things. It is made up of magnitude, it is made up of direction. If the magnitude changes, if the speed changes, we say that the velocity has changed. If the direction of motion changes, then also the velocity changes. Uniform circular motion is the type of motion in which a particle moves in a circle with a constant speed. When it moves in a circle with a constant speed, it is not at all moving with constant velocity because the direction keeps on changing. So the first thing we need to remember in uniform circular motion, the magnitude of speed is constant. If they ask you if a particle performs uniform circular motion, is the particle accelerating? Your answer has to be yes. Why? Because the direction keeps on changing. Next question, what is the time period of a particle doing uniform circular motion? So it will complete one cycle when it covers the total length 2 pi r. And the time taken to complete this one cycle has to be the length 2 pi r divided by the speed v. So 2 pi r by v, such a simple thing. Next thing, for uniform circular motion, since if you are writing angular velocity about center, the velocity will always be perpendicular to r. You don't have to write v perpendicular by r here. So the angular velocity about the center simply comes out to be v by r. Next thing, let's say a particle performs uniform circular motion in a circle of radius r and goes from a point A to another point B such that the position vector with respect to center turns by an angle theta. Question is, what is the displacement of this particle? See kids, the distance traveled will be r theta along the periphery, r theta, but displacement won't be r theta. So how to find the displacement? Quite easy. Think that this is initial position, this is final position, this angle is theta, the radius is r. You need to find the displacement. Which type of triangle this triangle must be? This triangle must be an isosceles triangle. This length is r, this length is also r. Now, if you drop a perpendicular from the base, it will divide this side into two equal parts because it's an isosceles triangle. If this whole angle is theta, this lower angle will be theta by 2 as well as upper angle will be theta by 2. So if this length is r, this angle is theta by 2, this angle is 90, can you guys tell me what has to be this length? So this length has to be r sine theta by 2, r sine theta by 2. Similarly, this length also have to be r sine theta by 2. So when the particle moves such that its position vector with respect to center has turned by angle theta, the distance traveled is r theta along the periphery, but the displacement is 2r sine theta by 2. You might have already mucked up this result. Then whenever you have a vector of magnitude, let's say r, and the vector turns by angle theta, keeping the magnitude same, then we say that the change in vector is given by 2r sine theta by 2. We learn now this result in the chapter of vectors. Next thing, when the particle goes from point A to point B, then what is the change in velocity? Change in speed is 0, but the change in velocity is not at all 0 because velocity changes its direction. Velocity is a vector quantity. When the velocity changes direction, what is the change in velocity? So we can say the magnitude remains same, equal to v, but as the radial vector turns by angle theta, the vector perpendicular to it, velocity vector, also turns by angle theta. And when a vector keeping the magnitude constant equals to v turned by angle theta, the change in velocity, the change in that vector is simply 2v sine theta by 2. Now, I am not taking some standard cases. In the paper, they won't ask you about theta. They will ask you about pi by 2. So you can use it. Okay. For rotation by 90 degrees, substitute here theta is pi by 2. In paper, they won't ask you for theta. They might ask for pi when it turns by half circle. I have asked it millions of times from students. Then when the particle completes half circle, what is the change in velocity? And 10% of time, many of them say that 0 because v speed is same. So the change in velocity is 0. Change in speed is 0. Beta, velocity is a vector quantity. Direction plays equally important role. So when the direction of velocity changes, the velocity vector changes. By how much? When it turns by 180 degrees, substitute here theta equals to 180. You get 2v sine 180 by 2, that is 2v sine 90, and sine 90 is 1. So you get the change in velocity to have a magnitude of 2v. Next thing, what will be the time taken by particle to go from A to B? So going from A to B, the particle covers a distance along the arc, and this distance covered along the arc equals to radius into theta. So this length equals to r theta. How much time it will take for the particle to go from A to B? The time taken has to be equal to distance traveled divided by speed. Distance traveled is r theta. The speed is v. So the time taken has to be r theta by v. This has to be the time taken. One important thing, here you have to take theta in radian. Don't take for 30 degree as 30 r. Okay, here theta has to be taken in radian. So if it turns by 30 degree, think of the angle in radian. So 30 degree is pi by 6. So the distance traveled is pi by 6 r with a speed v. So the time taken has to be r theta by v. Now see, two more important questions get asked here. You know what is the distance traveled? You know what is the displacement? Many a time they ask us average velocity. To get the average velocity, what we do? We do going from A to B. Going from A to B, the displacement is 2r sine theta by 2. Going from A to B, time taken is r theta by v. So what is average velocity? Total displacement upon total time taken. So if somebody asks you what is the average velocity in going from A to B, simply do 2r sine theta by 2 upon r theta by v. Sometimes they will ask you what is the average acceleration. Average acceleration is nothing but change in velocity upon time taken. So if they ask this particle performing uniform circular motion turns by angle theta, what is the average acceleration? So simply do change in velocity 2v sine theta by 2 upon time taken, that is r theta by v. So let us understand the concept of centripetal acceleration. What is the meaning of centripetal acceleration? We'll tell. But first of all, let's talk little bit more on uniform circular motion. When a particle performs uniform circular motion, then its speed remains constant. But despite the speed remaining constant, its direction of velocity continuously changes. If the direction of velocity is changing, you will say that the velocity is changing. And if for any particle, if the velocity is changing, the particle must accelerate, because acceleration is the change in velocity, the rate of change of velocity with respect to time. So let's take a case when the particle goes from point A to point B. We have learned in the last slide that the change in velocity will be equals to 2v sine theta by 2, and the time taken has to be equals to r theta by v, the length that will be traveled upon the speed. Now if I ask you what is the average acceleration from point A to point B, you will say that the average acceleration comes out to be 2v square sine theta by 2 upon 2v sine theta by 2 upon r theta by v. That gives you 2v square sine theta by 2 upon r theta. This is your average acceleration. Now think of using the same formula which is valid for a large angle for an infinitely small angle. Let's say this particle turns by a very infinitely small angle d theta. So when this particle turns by a very small angle d theta, then what will be the acceleration? So substitute theta tending to d theta. Now for infinitely small angular displacement, you won't call it average acceleration, you will call it instantaneous acceleration. Why? Because you have reduced the boundary of average to be very, very small. How small? Infinitely small. That's why this average acceleration now becomes instantaneous acceleration for theta tending to d theta. So in place of theta, if I substitute d theta, I get 2v square sine d theta by 2 upon r d theta. Now we have learned this for small value of theta, sine theta can be approximated to theta. The smaller the value of theta, the better the approximation. If theta is infinitely small, the approximation will be infinitely awesome. So I can write sine d theta by 2, since angle is very, very small. How small? Infinitely small. So the approximation is very, very good. How good? Infinitely good. And when the approximation is infinitely good, it becomes exactness. So I can write exactly sine d theta by 2 to be equal to d theta by 2. It's exact. It's not at all approximate. Now, once I have written sine d theta by 2 as d theta by 2, this d theta in numerator denominator get cancelled, this 2 and 2 get cancelled. The centripetal acceleration comes out to be v square by r. So let's start discussing the most important point in circular motion, the difference between centripetal acceleration and tangential acceleration, and what do they do. First thing first, kids, the job of acceleration is to change the velocity. If a particle accelerates, then its velocity must change. It's not maybe case. Its velocity, if the particle accelerates, its velocity must change. Now when I say velocity, it's a vector quantity. It has got magnitude, it has got direction. One of the acceleration changes the magnitude while the other one changes the direction. So remember that both the accelerations are changing the velocity. The centripetal acceleration changes the velocity by changing the direction of motion. The centripetal acceleration is the one responsible for providing the curved path. It changes the direction of motion. And remember that centripetal acceleration is perpendicular to velocity. Centripetal acceleration is perpendicular to velocity and it is responsible for changing the direction of motion. So who changes the speed? When I say velocity, it has magnitude, it has direction. Centripetal acceleration changes the direction of motion. So who changes the magnitude? So tangential acceleration is the one which changes the velocity by changing its magnitude. So we have got two types of acceleration: tangential acceleration, centripetal acceleration. Centripetal acceleration changes the velocity by changing the direction of motion. Tangential acceleration changes the velocity by changing the speed, the magnitude of velocity. Now, tangential acceleration is either parallel or anti-parallel to velocity. If the tangential acceleration is parallel to velocity, the magnitude of velocity, that is the speed, increases. If the tangential acceleration is anti-parallel to velocity, then the magnitude of velocity, that is the speed, decreases. Let's understand it more. Let's say we have some particle moving in a circle, moving on a curve, maybe a projectile, any particle in space, I don't care what it is. Now let's say at some instant I observe that this particle has a speed v and an acceleration a. So particle has a net speed v and a net acceleration a. You can see here we have some angle between the velocity and acceleration, and let's say this angle is theta. They might ask you what is the tangential acceleration, they might ask you what is the centripetal acceleration, and they might ask you what is the net acceleration. So we can break down this net acceleration of particle into components. One component in direction of velocity, and that component will be equals to a cos theta. One more component in direction perpendicular to velocity. That component in direction perpendicular to velocity will be a sin theta. So here I can write that the tangential acceleration is equals to a cos theta and the centripetal acceleration equals to a sin theta. This a sin theta is responsible for turning it, for changing the direction of motion. The centripetal acceleration do not change the speed, it changes the direction of motion. A sin theta changes the direction of motion, while this a cos theta changes the speed. Now in this particular example, since the component of acceleration, the tangential acceleration, came in the direction of velocity, the particle must be speeding up. It must be speeding up. Its kinetic energy must be increasing. Next thing, what is the net acceleration? A. What is the centripetal acceleration? A sin theta. What is the tangential acceleration? A cos theta. End of story. Now let's say a particle moves in a circle, because we are learning circular motion after all. For a particle moving in a circle, we must have centripetal acceleration, we may have centripetal acceleration, we must have tangential acceleration, we may have tangential acceleration. 4 options. Centripetal acceleration must be there, centripetal acceleration may be there, tangential acceleration must be there, or tangential acceleration may be there. Choose the correct option. It's a multiple correct answer question. So for a particle moving in circular path, it must have centripetal acceleration, centripetal acceleration may be there, tangential acceleration must be there, tangential acceleration may be there. Now if the particle moves on circle, its direction of motion is definitely changing, because it's not moving on straight line, it's moving on a curved path. So since the direction of motion is continuously changing, centripetal acceleration must be there, it must be there, it has to be there. What about tangential acceleration? If the particle speeds up or slows down, then you must have tangential acceleration. But there is a case of uniform circular motion. In case of uniform circular motion, the speed remains constant. If the speed remains constant, it means that the tangential acceleration must be 0. So there are cases. If the particle speeds up, there has to be tangential acceleration. If the particle slows down, there has to be tangential acceleration. But if the particle moves with a constant speed, then there do not have to be any tangential acceleration. So tangential acceleration may be there if the speed changes. But if a particle moves in a circle, centripetal acceleration is a must. This is one more question that get asked. For a particle doing uniform circular motion, is the acceleration constant? So people think that, okay, centripetal acceleration equals to v square by r. Since when the particle performs uniform circular motion, speed is constant, r is constant, so centripetal acceleration has to be constant. Bhai, centripetal acceleration is again a vector quantity. If a particle performs uniform circular motion, speed is constant, so tangential acceleration is 0. It will have only centripetal acceleration. Let's say when the particle is here, centripetal acceleration will be towards center here. After some time, particle reaches here, centripetal acceleration will be towards center here. After some time, particle reaches here, centripetal acceleration will be towards center here. So at every instant, the centripetal acceleration is towards center. For a uniform circular motion, the magnitude of centripetal acceleration will remain constant, but acceleration is again a vector quantity. The direction keeps on changing. So the centripetal acceleration even keeps on changing. So let's learn the heading of radius of curvature. Now, if a particle has velocity v and acceleration a such that the angle between velocity and acceleration is theta, we can break down the acceleration vector into two components. We have done that already. This tangential acceleration will be a cos theta, and the centripetal acceleration, which is perpendicular to velocity, will be a sin theta. So centripetal acceleration will be a sin theta, and we know that the centripetal acceleration equals to v square by r. The particle need not to move in a circle to define the radius of curvature. We define the radius of curvature as v square by a perpendicular. What is a perpendicular? The component of acceleration perpendicular to velocity. So the radius of curvature is v square by a perpendicular, where switch it, where a perpendicular is the component of acceleration perpendicular to velocity. Here the question: a particle has been projected with speed v at an angle theta with the horizontal. Your mission is to find the radius of curvature at the point of projection and when the particle is at maximum height. So first part, let's solve. When the particle is at point of projection, it has got speed v here at some angle theta. The acceleration just after projection is due to acceleration due to gravity, which is downward g. Now you have to find what is the component of this downward acceleration g perpendicular to the velocity. This component matters. So now draw a perpendicular to velocity. If this angle is theta, this angle will be 90 minus theta, and since the horizontal and vertical are perpendicular, this angle will be theta. So the component of acceleration of gravity perpendicular to velocity will be g cos theta. So you will say, for the first part solution, simply the radius of curvature has to be v square, whatever is the speed at that instant, upon the perpendicular acceleration, a perpendicular. So you get v square by a perpendicular, and the perpendicular component of acceleration is g cos theta. So the radius of curvature at the point of projection is v square by g cos theta. The second part asks us, what is the radius of curvature at the maximum height? When the projectile is at maximum height, the speed of projectile is equals to v cos theta. And when the projectile is at maximum height, then the acceleration at that instant is g downward. You can see here the entire acceleration g is already perpendicular to velocity. So how to write the radius of curvature? The radius of curvature has to be simply v square by a perpendicular, and the entire acceleration is already perpendicular to velocity. So the radius of curvature comes out to be v square cos square theta, v square by a perpendicular, which is g. So we have just learned how to find the radius of curvature. It's an important topic. So let's do two examples. The first example, a particle moves in a circle of radius 100 meter. The rate of change of speed is 3 meter per second square. Find the centripetal acceleration, tangential acceleration, and the net acceleration at the instant when the speed of particle is 20 meter per second. So first of all, in the question itself, they have given me that the rate of change of speed is 3 meter per second square, and they have told me right here that 3 meter per second square is nothing but tangential acceleration, because tangential acceleration is equal to the rate of change of speed with respect to time. Now what will be the centripetal acceleration? At the instant speed is 20 meter per second and the radius is 100 meter. So the centripetal acceleration has to be v square by r. So you will do 20 into 20 v square upon r, that is 100. So this becomes 4 meter per second square. Now kids, understand that the tangential acceleration is 3, the centripetal acceleration is 4. We know that the net acceleration has to be equal to under root of centripetal square plus tangential square. So 4 square plus 3 square, that is 16 plus 9, and under root of 25 gives you 5 meter per second square. That will be the net acceleration. So you got tangential acceleration, You got centripetal acceleration and you got net acceleration. Moving on to next question. A particle moves in a circle of radius 20 meter. At some instant, you find that the net acceleration of the particle makes an angle of 60 degree with the radius, and the net acceleration of the particle is 10 meter per second square. The question here is simple. What is the speed of the particle at this instant? So how to find it? If the net acceleration makes an angle of 60 degree, you can break down this net acceleration into two components. Using this net acceleration, you can find out the centripetal acceleration, you can find out the tangential acceleration. The centripetal acceleration will be equal to 10 cos 60. Cos 60 is half. So the centripetal acceleration comes out to be 10 into half, that is 5 meter per second square. Now we know that acceleration centripetal equals to v square by r, and the r is 20. So from here you get v square equals to ac into 20, and the centripetal acceleration is 5. Substitute it 5. So v square comes out to be 100. So the speed at this instant has to be 10 meter per second. So now what we are going to do is comparison between linear and angular motion. In linear, we have got displacement. In angular, we have got angular displacement. In linear, we have got velocity, which is the rate of change of position with respect to time. In angular, we have got angular velocity, which is the rate of change of angular displacement with respect to time. The average linear velocity is total displacement upon total time taken. The average angular velocity is the total angular displacement upon total time taken. Acceleration is equals to the rate of change of velocity with respect to time. Acceleration is also written as v dv by dx, and majority of good questions are based on it, where you have to substitute acceleration as v dv by dx. Similarly, in angular also, the angular acceleration equals to d omega by dt, that is the rate of change of angular velocity with respect to time, and that can also be substituted as omega d omega by d theta. Now the three equation of motion. V equals to u plus atx equals to ut plus half at square, and v square minus u square equals to 2s. Their also counterpart exist in rotational circular motion. The angular velocity at any time t equals to initial angular velocity plus angular acceleration into time. The angular displacement equals to initial angular velocity into time plus half into angular acceleration into time square. The final angular velocity whole square minus initial angular velocity whole square equals to 2 times angular acceleration into angular displacement. Where can you use these equations, these three, when the acceleration is constant? So where can you use these three? When the alpha is constant, the angular acceleration is constant. Two more equation which can be used only when the acceleration is constant. The first one, the average velocity for a particle moving with constant velocity is given by initial velocity plus final velocity by 2. Similarly, the average angular velocity is given as angular velocity at time equals to 0 plus angular velocity at time equals to t divided by 2. The displacement in n second equals to initial velocity plus a by 2 into 2n minus 1. The same equation gets formed here. The angle rotated in n second equals to initial angular velocity plus alpha by 2 into 2n minus 1. All these 5 equations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are valid only when acceleration is constant. Similarly, all these 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are valid only when alpha is constant. If angular acceleration is not constant, never use these equations. These equations work only when angular acceleration is constant. We have also learned Galileo's law of freely falling body. Galileo's law of freely falling body says that for a motion starting from rest with uniform acceleration, the ratio of displacement in consecutive n second is in the ratio 1:3:5:7:9. People just remember this 1:3:5:7:9. They don't remember the left hand side. So we are going to focus on remembering the left hand side. What is it? For a motion starting from rest. So the motion must start from rest with uniform acceleration. For a motion starting from rest with uniform acceleration, the ratio of displacement in consecutive t seconds, means equal frame of time, in consecutive t seconds is in the ratio 1:3:5:7:9. The same law works even for circular. You can say for a motion starting from rest with constant angular acceleration, the ratio of angular displacement in equal interval of time is in the ratio 1:3:5. So let's say there is a disk which start rotating. If in the first 10 seconds it has rotated by 100 degree, so in the next 10 seconds, that is time equals to 10 seconds to time equals to 20 seconds, in the next 10 seconds it will rotate by 300 degree. In the next 10 seconds, it will rotate by 500 degree. So for a motion starting from rest with constant angular acceleration, the ratio of displacement, angular displacement in consecutive t second is in the ratio 1:3:5. So now let's talk about centripetal force. For any object moving in circular path, since the direction of motion changes, there must be a centripetal acceleration that we have discussed. But to accelerate, you need a force. If you need a net acceleration towards the center equals to v square by r or equal to omega square r, then you need a net force towards the center. Think on this question. If a particle of mass m has a net acceleration a, if a particle of mass m has a net acceleration a, what is the net force acting on that particle? So if the particle of mass m has net acceleration a, then the net force acting on this particle has to be ma. Similarly, for any object moving in circular path, at any instant, if the speed is v and if it moves in a circular path of radius r, then it have to have a centripetal acceleration, and that centripetal acceleration is v square by r. So if the acceleration is v square by r, then there has to be a force towards the center, and that force has to be mass times acceleration. That's why we say then the centripetal force acting has to be equals to mv square by r, mass times acceleration, or m omega square r. From the equation of Newton's law, we always write equation as the net force in direction of acceleration equals to mass into acceleration. So always write the equation in circular motion as the net force acting towards the center. The net force acting towards the center equals to centripetal force. Look at all the forces acting on the body moving in circular path. Then find out its component in the radial direction. Then the net force acting towards the center must be equal to centripetal force. Let's do one question. Let's say there are two masses 2m and m moving on a table. So this is a horizontal surface, and we are looking from top. This is a horizontal surface and we are looking from top. Now this mass 2m moves in a circle of radius l, while this mass m moves in a circle of radius 3l, l plus 2l, 3l. Question is, there are two strings, the first string and the second string. What will be the ratio of tension in these two strings? So remember that the net force acting towards the center has to be centripetal force. Look at this mass 2m, it's on horizontal surface, it's not vertical. Vertical we will do later, it's horizontal. So on this mass 2m, there are two forces, a force T1 towards the center, a force T2 away from the center. Always make the equation of circular motion as the net force acting towards the center equals to centripetal force. So the net force acting towards the center, you will write T1 minus T2 equals to mass of the body 2m into omega square into the radius in which the body rotates l. This is your first equation. Second equation you can make on this mass. On this mass there is only one force T2 towards the center. So you will write T2, the net force acting towards the center, equals to centripetal force. Its mass is m into omega square into the radius in which it moves, l plus 2l, that is 3l. So here you get that T2 equals to 3m omega square l. If you substitute the value of T2 here, you will get that T1 equals to 2m omega square l plus 3m omega square l. So your T1 will comes out to be 5m omega square l. In the question, they have asked what is the ratio of T1 to T2. So 5m omega square l upon 3m omega square l. So the ratio simply comes out to be 5 by 3. So let's do one more example. There is a disk of certain radius which rotates because of a motor with an angular velocity omega. There is a coin placed at distance r from the axis and the disk rotates with an angular velocity omega. If the friction coefficient between the coin and the plate is mu, what is the condition for coin to keep on rotating with the disk? Now question here is, when the coin rotates, it must have centripetal acceleration because its direction of motion is changing. Who provides that centripetal acceleration? A force. Which force? The friction force present between the disk and the coin. Now the maximum possible value of this friction force can be mu mg. So the maximum possible available force towards the center is mu mg, it can't be more than this. So if the required centripetal force m omega square r is less than or equal to the available friction force, then friction force will act so as to seize the relative motion between the surfaces. So we will write for no slipping, for no relative motion between the surfaces, the required centripetal force, whatever is the force required to keep the coin in circular motion with the disc so that there is no relative motion between them, has to be less than or equal to the available friction force. So if omega square r is less than equals to mu g, the coin won't slip. If omega square r becomes more than mu g, then the coin will slip. Now here in same question many a times they ask omega, they will give you r mu g, they will ask omega. Sometimes they will give mu g omega, they will ask r. Sometimes they will give mu r and g you know, and they will ask mu. That what has to be the minimum value of friction coefficient for no slipping. So just remember that for no slipping, the available friction force mu and g should be more than the required centripetal acceleration, more than or equal. Now with this I am ending this session. What is left in circular is banking of road and vertical circular motion. We will do it in next session. See you guys. Bye bye.